James sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the empty apartment as if the walls could tell him what went wrong. The front door had slammed behind Anna only moments ago, yet the sound still echoed through the rooms like a warning. The silence that followed was heavier than he could bear. He thought he had understood her, thought he had been paying attention, but apparently that was not enough. 5 years of marriage, countless dinners, shared laughter, arguments, and promises all seemed to have vanished in a single moment. He had never imagined the apartment could feel so large and cold with only himself inside. He tried to retrace the events leading up to this. Their argument had started innocently enough, a disagreement over household chores, then escalated into a conversation about priorities, time, and feelings that had been neglected for months. Anna's voice had become quieter as the tension grew. Her eyes glistening with frustration he failed to notice until it was too late. And then, just like that, she left. She didn't slam her hand on the table. She didn't yell. She simply walked away. James ran his hands through his hair, trying to stop the panic from rising. The thought of waking up to another empty day terrified him. He remembered the subtle signs he had ignored, the way she spent more time on her phone. The evenings she seemed distant, the small sighs that went unnoticed. Hindsight was brutal, and every missed cue now stabbed him with regret. For the first few days, James wandered through the apartment like a ghost. He ate cold meals, half forgotten, and stared at the bedroom where she had once slept, now untouched. Work became a distraction he couldn't focus on, and even the simplest tasks felt impossible. Friends called, asking if he wanted to go out, but he declined, too lost in his thoughts. Every corner of the apartment reminded him of her absence. Every sound from the street below seemed distant, as though the world continued without caring for his pain. Then a message appeared on his phone that made him freeze. He unlocked it, uncertain if he wanted to read the words or ignore them completely. "Hi James, it's Margaret. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I'll be visiting next week. I'd like to check in with you while I'm in town. Anna's mother, Margaret." Her name alone brought a rush of mixed emotions, fear, guilt, and a strange glimmer of hope. Margaret had always been kind, yet firm, someone who could see the truth in people without them having to say a word. She had been protective of Anna, and her presence now seemed both comforting and intimidating. James didn't know if he was ready to face her. Yet he also felt a strange relief at the thought of someone else knowing what had happened. Someone who might guide him toward understanding, even if he wasn't sure he deserved it. He paused before typing a reply, unsure how to sound composed. "Of course, Margaret. You're welcome to come over," he wrote, his fingers trembling slightly. For the rest of the week, James couldn't concentrate on anything. Each day stretched endlessly, marked by quiet introspection and nervous anticipation. He cleaned the apartment obsessively, rearranging furniture and tidying every surface as if doing so could make everything right again. Yet no matter how polished the floors or how neatly stacked the books, the emptiness remained. Every corner of the home whispered Anna's absence, and every shadow seemed heavier. James remembered the small things that had once made him smile, the way Anna's laughter filled the apartment during morning coffee, the way she hummed while cooking, the little jokes and gestures that made life feel lighter. And now those memories were bittersweet, pressing against his chest with a weight that was hard to bear. He realized that the fight wasn't just about chores or misunderstandings. It was about losing touch, about forgetting to truly see and appreciate each other. The night before Margaret's visit, James couldn't sleep. He sat at the dining table staring at the clock, thinking about what he would say, how he would explain, and whether his words could ever make a difference. He rehearsed apologies and confessions, knowing that no matter how carefully he chose them, the conversation would change everything. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, he was confronted not by external challenges, but by his own mistakes and his own heart. When the morning came, James felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. Margaret's visit could be the turning point, he hoped. The moment when clarity replaced confusion, understanding replaced regret. But he also feared confrontation, feared hearing truths about himself he had long avoided. He straightened his shirt, adjusted his hair, and practiced a smile he wasn't sure he could hold. The first knock at the door made him jump. He opened it to find Margaret standing there, her presence calm yet commanding. "James, thank you for letting me in," she said, her voice warm, carrying both kindness and quiet authority. She held a small suitcase ready for her stay, and her eyes seemed to look right through him. Seeing everything he had tried to hide from himself, "Please, come in," James said, stepping aside. His voice sounded shakier than he intended. But Margaret's gentle smile put him slightly at ease as she entered. James noticed the subtle ways her presence filled the room, an energy of grace and understanding that seemed almost tangible. The apartment, though still heavy with absence, felt lighter somehow, as if her calm had a weightless quality that countered the heaviness he had carried all week. They moved into small talk, discussing work, the apartment, and the recent events with Anna. Margaret listened more than she spoke, her gaze attentive and quiet, prompting James to open up in ways he hadn't realized he needed. Each word, each exchange felt like a thread tying him back to awareness, back to the reality of what had happened, and back to the possibility of understanding. By the end of the first meeting, James felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt since Anna left. Hope. Not certainty, but the first small spark that perhaps, through guidance, reflection, and effort, he could begin to make things right. Margaret's visit was no longer just a visit, was a mirror, showing him both his failures and the potential for change. That night, James sat alone in the quiet apartment, the echo of Margaret's words and presence lingering in the air. He realized the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he now knew he couldn't continue to drift in the fog of regret. Something had to change, and it would begin with him. The morning Margaret arrived, James was already anxious. He had spent hours cleaning the apartment, straightening cushions, washing dishes, and arranging everything perfectly. Nothing could be left out of place. He wanted her visit to feel calm, controlled, safe. Yet despite his preparation, his heart raced as he heard the knock at the door. He took a deep breath, smoothed his shirt, and opened it. Margaret stood there, calm and composed, with a suitcase in one hand and a warm smile on her face. "James, thank you for letting me in," she said, her tone gentle but firm. Her eyes held a kind of quiet understanding, the kind that could see past his walls and notice the emotions he tried to hide. She was confident, yet her presence brought comfort. She had always been perceptive about Anna, and now, somehow, she seemed to see James as well, seeing the man who had faltered but could still change. "Please, come in," James said, stepping aside, though his voice trembled slightly. The apartment felt different with her there. It no longer seemed empty. Margaret moved slowly, observing the space, taking in the small details, yet without judgment. There was a lightness to her presence, a calm energy that made James notice for the first time how tense he had been all week. They began with small talk. Margaret asked about his work, how he had been coping since Anna left, and gently inquired about the apartment. James responded as honestly as he could, noting the subtle ways her questions weren't intrusive but guiding. She had a way of prompting reflection without forcing it, encouraging him to speak while making him feel at ease. It was disarming, and James found himself talking more than he intended, revealing fears, regrets, and truths he hadn't shared with anyone. As the day progressed, Margaret suggested they prepare lunch together. She moved around the kitchen with natural ease, chopping vegetables and humming quietly. James helped where he could, though he felt clumsy, unsure of what to do. Margaret's tone was encouraging, never condescending, guiding him in a way that made him feel capable. In the process, they worked side by side, their actions synchronized without speaking much, a rhythm that reminded James of the days when he and Anna had cooked together, the connection they once had while preparing lunch. Margaret gently brought up Anna. "I know things have been difficult between you two," she said softly, "but I want you to think about why she left. Not just the last fight, but everything leading up to it. Sometimes people walk away not because they stopped caring, but because they feel unseen." James felt the weight of her words. He thought of the subtle moments he had missed, the sighs, the glances, the times Anna had tried to express herself in ways he had ignored. He realized that he had been physically present, but emotionally absent. And that absence had created a distance he hadn't understood until now. His chest tightened, and he swallowed hard. I didn't see it, he admitted quietly. I thought I was doing enough. Margaret reached across the counter and placed a hand lightly on his. Seeing is only the first step, James, she said gently. The second is action. You still have a chance, but you need to. Start with yourself first. Her words struck him with a force he hadn't expected. For the first time since Anna left, he felt a small spark of clarity. A recognition that change was possible if he was willing to take responsibility for his actions. It wasn't about convincing Anna immediately or erasing the past. It was about understanding himself and learning how to be fully present, attentive and caring. Lunch passed in quiet conversation, interspersed with laughter over small mishaps in the kitchen. James noticed that Margaret's presence brought a warmth to the apartment that had been missing since Anna's departure. He realized that her visit wasn't just about monitoring or offering advice. It was about guiding him to recognize the flaws he had overlooked and helping him see a path forward. Later, they moved to the living room with cups of tea. Margaret encouraged James to reflect more deeply. You can't fix Anna by yourself, she said, her voice calm. But you can fix how you show up for her. If you learn to truly see her again, maybe she'll remember why she loved you. That's the first step. James nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. He understood that rebuilding trust and connection wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Yet Margaret's guidance made the task seem achievable. He realized that her presence was not only a chance to understand Anna better, but a rare opportunity to grow as a person, to correct mistakes and become someone capable of sustaining love as evening approached. Margaret suggested a walk in the nearby park. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. They walked quietly at first, letting the sound of their footsteps on the pavement fill the space. Margaret's presence was reassuring. She didn't push him to talk, but allowed him to process his thoughts. After a while, she asked gently, "Do you know what you want, James?" James stopped considering her question. "I want to make it right," he admitted. "But I don't know if she let me." Margaret smiled softly. "That's why I'm here. To remind you that the door isn't closed yet. You just have to knock with honesty and care." Her words stayed with him as they returned to the apartment. That night, he sat alone, reflecting on everything Margaret had said. Her visit had not just been a visit, had been a mirror, showing him the parts of himself he had neglected. He realized that understanding Anna's needs was only part of the solution. He needed to change his own behaviors, attitudes, and presence if he hoped to reconnect. By the end of the evening, James felt a quiet determination he hadn't felt in weeks. Margaret had opened a door not only to hope for his marriage, but also to self-awareness, to the possibility that he could truly show up for the person he loved. He understood that this was only the beginning, that the journey ahead would require effort, reflection, and courage. Margaret's visit had shifted something in him, and for the first time since Anna left, James felt a flicker of hope that perhaps the distance between them could be bridged. Not with grand gestures, but with sincere, consistent actions and a willingness to listen, see, and understand. That was the lesson he would carry forward. And he knew it would shape the choices he made in the days to come. The days following Margaret's arrival moved quickly, yet each moment carried a weight of reflection James had not anticipated. Margaret stayed with him, not as a critic, but as a guide, offering insight without judgment, her presence both firm and gentle. From the very first morning, she helped him see things he had ignored for years. She never scolded him. Instead, she shared stories of Anna's childhood, her dreams, her quirks, and the small ways she had always expressed care. James listened intently, realizing how little he remembered of the early days of their relationship. Not the grand gestures, but the little things that built love over time. Margaret encouraged him to reflect on his own actions. Every conversation revealed truths James had tried to avoid. He thought he had been attentive, yet he recognized his repeated distractions: late nights at work, half-hearted conversations, sighs ignored, concerns dismissed. The emotional distance that had grown between him and Anna wasn't dramatic or violent, was quiet, cumulative, and now painfully clear. Margaret explained gently, love isn't just being present physically, James, it's showing up emotionally, consistently, even in small ways. When that stops, even without realizing it, distance grows. They spent time in the apartment, cooking together, arranging books, and sharing tea. Margaret guided him in subtle exercises, asking him to describe Anna's favorite meals, her habits, the way she laughed at small things. At first, James felt clumsy, hesitant, but gradually he began to recall details long forgotten. He realized that remembering these small pieces of her life rekindled feelings of tenderness, the appreciation he had let slip away. Every recollection, every shared story with Margaret created a bridge back to the emotional intimacy he had neglected. One evening, they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Margaret broke the quiet with a question that made James pause. "Do you know why you want her back?" she asked. James looked out at the skyline, considering the distance he had allowed to grow. I don't just want her back," he said slowly. "I want to be the man she deserves. Someone who notices her, appreciates her, and is truly present. I want to fix what I've ignored for too long." Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's the first step. Understanding your own shortcomings and being willing to change is more than half the battle. The rest is showing it through actions, patience, and consistent care." James realized she was right. He had spent days ruminating on what went wrong, yet reflection alone would not repair what had been broken. He needed to act, to show Anna that he had truly listened and changed. Margaret encouraged him to plan small gestures, ways to demonstrate attentiveness, and to rekindle the quiet intimacy that had formed the foundation of their relationship. In the afternoons, they took walks through the nearby park. Margaret encouraged James to notice details, to slow down, to observe the world around him as Anna might. She reminded him that love is often expressed in subtle ways, listening without interrupting, remembering small preferences, offering thoughtful gestures. James began to understand that these simple actions could rebuild trust and connection far more than grand declarations ever could. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Margaret asked James to describe the happiest memory he had with Anna. At first he hesitated, then slowly began recounting the time they had spent a rainy afternoon cooking together in their first apartment. They had laughed when the pasta boiled over, and Anna had made him taste every sauce, insisting he critique each one. The memory brought a warmth to James's chest, a reminder of the joy they had shared. Margaret smiled. "This is the foundation," she said. "It's not about never fighting. It's about remembering why you fell in love and finding your way back to that." Margaret's guidance extended beyond emotional recollection. She encouraged James to consider practical changes in his life, managing work stress, making time for meaningful conversation, and creating moments that reminded both of them of shared joy. James found himself inspired, not pressured. He realized that he had been passive in his relationship, allowing routines and distractions to dictate his connection with Anna. Now he felt empowered, aware that he could actively rebuild what had been damaged. One afternoon, as they prepared tea together, James shared his fears aloud. "What if she doesn't want me back? What if I've ruined things beyond repair?" Margaret's eyes were kind but steady. "James, you cannot control her choices. All you can do is show that you have grown, that you are aware, and that you care. True connection requires courage and honesty. If you show up fully, at least you will have tried, and that matters." Her words struck a chord. James realized he had been hiding behind excuses. The stress of work, fatigue, the belief that love could survive inattentiveness. Margaret reminded him that love requires attention, respect, and empathy. The small neglects, ignored emotions, and overlooked gestures had compounded into the distance Anna had felt. Recognizing this didn't diminish his love, clarified how he could demonstrate it better. By the end of the third day, James felt a subtle transformation within himself. Margaret's visit was no longer just a temporary presence. Ed had become a catalyst for change. He recognized that her role was not to intervene between him and Anna, but to guide him toward understanding himself, seeing his shortcomings, and embracing the possibility of improvement. That night, James sat in the living room reflecting on everything he had learned. He realized that Margaret's visit had not only given him perspective on Anna's feelings, but it also illuminated his own growth. He understood that reconciliation, if it occurred, would depend on his ability to consistently show presence, empathy, and care. He felt a spark of hope, tempered by the understanding that change required time and patience. Margaret's visit had become a mirror. She reflected his mistakes, his potential, and the path forward. James no longer felt helpless or adrift. He felt capable of acting, aware of the steps he needed to take, and ready to demonstrate the love and attention Anna deserved. As he prepared for the next day, he resolved to plan his actions thoughtfully, small gestures, honest conversations, and an attentive presence. Margaret had reminded him that love could be nurtured again, but only if he approached it with humility, care, and commitment. For the first time in weeks, James felt confident that he could face Anna, that he could rebuild a connection rooted not only in memory, but in the renewed intention to see, hear, and cherish her fully. And so, as the city lights flickered through the window, James felt the first true sense of hope. Margaret had come as a visitor, but she had become a teacher, guiding him through reflection and action. The journey toward reconciliation had begun. And James knew that the lessons he had learned in these few days would shape not only his approach to Anna, but his own growth as a man and partner. The quiet hum of the apartment was no longer oppressive. Instead, it carried the weight of possibility, the promise that with insight, care, and effort, the door that had closed might one day open again. The morning air felt different to James. There was a quiet energy in the apartment, a mixture of anticipation and resolve. Margaret had left early, her visit complete, leaving James with a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in weeks. He walked through the rooms, noticing small changes in himself already. He felt lighter, more aware, and surprisingly calm. For the first time since Anna left, he felt ready not only to see her, but to show her the man he had become. He spent the morning preparing the apartment thoughtfully. Small touches that reflected attention and carefresh flowers on the counter. A neatly folded throw on the sofa, a warm aroma of breakfast filled the space. He didn't try to impress with grandeur, but with sincerity. Each detail a silent message. He had noticed, he had remembered, and he cared. The preparation itself calmed him, giving structure to the swirling mix of hope and fear in his chest. When the knock at the door came, James's heart leaped. He opened it to find Anna standing there, her coat in hand, eyes cautious but curious. There was a brief silence, a charged pause where neither knew exactly how to begin. James swallowed hard, meeting her gaze. "I didn't expect to see you," he said softly, his voice unsteady yet earnest. Anna's eyes swept across the apartment, noticing subtle changes, the orderliness, the small, thoughtful details, the quiet warmth. Her lips curved in a faint smile, though a trace of uncertainty lingered. "I was worried," she admitted, her voice quiet but honest. James stepped aside, gesturing her in. "I know, and I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that went wrong, and what I need to do differently. I want to show up for you, really show up, not just with words, but with my actions." Anna studied him, her expression a mix of skepticism and hope. "I left because I felt unseen," she said, her voice soft, tinged with vulnerability. "And I don't know if that can change overnight." "I don't expect overnight," James replied, his tone calm but determined. "But I want to try. And I've had some guidance to help me understand what I missed, what I need to do to be present for you. I want to rebuild step by step and be someone you can rely on." Anna hesitated for a long moment. then glanced at the small vase on the counter, a gift Margaret had left, symbolizing guidance and support. It seemed to carry a quiet reassurance. "Maybe we can start with dinner. Just the two of us," she said finally. James felt relief wash over him, but it was tempered by respect for her caution. "I'd like that," he said, his voice steady. "I want to make this a beginning, not just a moment." They moved into the kitchen together, laughter slowly returning as they prepared the meal. Cooking together felt familiar, yet new different, because now James was present in a way he hadn't been before. Every shared task, every small mishap, brought moments of connection. They talked quietly about memories, hopes, and the subtle changes in their lives. Finding humor in small mistakes and comfort in shared understanding as they sat down to eat, James realized the significance of this evening. It was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about presence, attention, and patience. Each choice, each word, and each action mattered. By simply being there, fully attentive. He was beginning to rebuild the emotional foundation that had been neglected. After dinner, they moved to the living room. The soft glow of the city outside filled the apartment with warmth. Anna rested her head briefly on James's shoulder, and he felt a calm reassurance settle in his chest. The tension, the fear, and the guilt had not vanished entirely. But they were tempered now by understanding, reflection, and renewed commitment. James reflected on Margaret's role in this transformation. Her visit had not been about controlling the situation, judging him, or fixing Anna for him. Instead, she had guided him to see clearly, to recognize his shortcomings, and to embrace the responsibility of showing up fully. It was through this guidance that James had gained the courage and clarity to face Anna, to communicate honestly, and to begin rebuilding their connection. In the following days, James continued to implement the lessons he had learned. He listened attentively, remembered small preferences, and took deliberate actions to demonstrate care. He did not expect immediate reconciliation or perfection. He understood that rebuilding trust and emotional closeness would take time. Every interaction became an opportunity to show growth, empathy, and understanding. Anna responded gradually, cautiously, but with glimpses of the warmth they had once shared. She noticed James's efforts, the way he had become more attentive, present, and patient. She shared her feelings more openly, feeling seen and heard in ways she had not for months. Slowly, their conversations shifted from tension and distance to connection and understanding. One afternoon, while sitting together on the balcony, James spoke softly. "I understand now that love isn't just about staying together. It's about seeing each other, listening, and being present in the moments that matter. I've learned that too late, but I want to keep learning with you." Anna looked at him, her eyes reflecting trust and hope. "I see it, James. I see that you're trying, really trying, and that's what matters." They shared a quiet smile, a gentle acknowledgement of the journey they had undertaken and the possibilities ahead. The apartment, once heavy with absence and regret, now felt alive with warmth, connection, and the promise of renewal. By the end of the day, James understood something profound. Love was not static. It required attention, patience, and consistent effort. Margaret had been a catalyst, showing him the importance of reflection and action. Anna's cautious openness had given him the opportunity to apply those lessons to demonstrate growth and to nurture the emotional bond that had been fraying. As the evening drew to a close, James and Anna sat together quietly, holding hands, sharing small gestures of affection. The apartment was no longer a reminder of absence, but a space of possibility. The door that had slammed shut weeks ago now seemed like a symbol of second chances, of the opportunity to rebuild trust, connection, and love. James realized that the journey was ongoing. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and adjustments needed along the way. Yet, for the first time since Anna left, he felt confident in his ability to show up fully, to care attentively, and to nurture the relationship with patience, empathy, and love. That night, as they shared a quiet conversation before bed, James felt a calm certainty. Margaret's guidance had set him on the path, Anna's presence had illuminated the way, and he was committed to walking it with care and dedication. The past could not be erased, but the future was open, full of possibilities to rebuild, reconnect, and cherish each other anew. And so, in that softly lit apartment, James and Anna began again with perfection, but with awareness, presence, and the willingness to see and nurture each other fully. The love they had shared was not lost. It had been rediscovered, renewed through reflection, guidance, and the courage to act.